Welcome back, everyone. My name is Hari Srinivasan. American Cities Rebuilding continues this afternoon. We're turning back to Atlanta and talking about how a faith based program can come up with some different housing solutions. Joining me now are Joshua Humphreys, Director of Housing and Community Development, Leonard Adams, CEO of Quest Communities, and Reverend Dr. Susan Hillary Buxton, Allen Temple AME. So, first, Leonard, give us kind of an understanding, if you can, for people who are watching in different parts of the country, what the housing landscape is like across Atlanta.
Yes, thank you, Hari, for having us. Yes, the landscape of housing across Atlanta, sadly, is primarily like you see in most metropolitan cities. We are working diligently to make sure that affordable housing and Atlanta is an affordable place to stay. But we are dealing with, like most metropolitan cities, an influx and increases in rents and home ownership. So affordable housing is at the top of the list for our mayor, Mayor Andre Dickens, to produce 20,000 units over the next 8 years. So that's what's happening. We're having the traditional flight from the inner city, the return of that flight that is doing some of the real estate increases. And I will end on basically real estate was designed to house the highest rents possible. So there has to be some intentional and purposeful affordable housing developments. And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Joshua, earlier in this program, we spoke to the mayor, and he had told us about kind of some of the initiatives that are underway to try and change what Leonard just described. Give me an idea of how you're working with the zoning codes, how you're finding land where there can be new housing built, especially considering how important affordable housing is.
Sure. I think there's a couple of categories for us that we think are really important. So one's the regulatory side, right? You mentioned zoning, but I think it's broader than just zoning. It's all the little pieces that go into making a project happen that the government touches. So whether that's a permitting on a project, the zoning entitlements, the funding and financial strings that can help subsidize affordable housing in the city. Too often those get in the way of building the kind of housing stock that we want to see in Atlanta. And so what we're working through right now, really with the development community, is to understand where those pinch points are, where our regulatory processes and different city departments are getting in our way and stopping the kind of housing we want to see, and how we can address those, whether that's changes in city code, changes in a policy, or creating a new program to address those gaps. That's one area that we're focused on. The other you mentioned is where in the land that we build in. So, for us, housing is a means to an end. It's the bedrock kind of building block of a given neighborhood, and we want to create whole, healthy neighborhoods where you've got a mixed income housing stock, but also have the grocery stores and neighborhood healthcare centers, and educational assets that are really important to neighborhoods to thrive, and that you have a housing that's close to all of those things. So as we started looking at this work and looking at land across the city, one thing that we found is that publicly owned land, so city land owned by the city or the housing authority, the transit authority, these different public agencies, a lot of the vacant land in our corridors is owned by public entities. And so the mayor pulled together the leaders of all of these different groups and said, let's work together on this, and let's build the housing that we need in these corridors, and let's build the other core neighborhood amenities that we need together. Let's look at the housing authority side and ask, maybe a school makes sense there, but housing makes more sense on the school side. And maybe we flip that over, we move that together, and then we bring a development partner in to build both a new school and new housing. And so working together on that, I think it has allowed us to leverage the underutilized land that we have, the publicly owned land, bring that to the table, make it ready for development. And I think that really feeds into the faith-based initiative that we've launched as well, because the other, I guess, key area where there's underutilized land is in the faith community. Faith institutions don't pay taxes, similar to public institutions. And so there's not the same kind of drum of having to pay property taxes and other types of reasons that you may want to develop the land. So Mayor early on in his time in office back in February launched an initiative and said, hey, faith leaders, come alongside me. We're going to put our public land to use you put your underutilized land to use. That parking lot that you don't use very much, or that extra grassy area that you acquired 40 years ago and don't really have any use for, we come help us serve the needs of this city. Affordable housing is a fundamental need we have, and come alongside me and help make that happen. And we've had an incredible response to that. So I think that combination of publicly owned land and faith on land being made available and oriented to build affordable housing really addresses a lot of the underutilized land that we have in Atlanta in a way that I think is really beneficial. And we're excited to see that type of unique collaboration and use of land in non-traditional ways to address this core need.
Reverend Buxton, what are the members of your community telling you? I'm not familiar with your church, and I suspect other people watching on this stream. Tell us a little bit about who comes and what their concerns are.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and hello to everyone. I'm Susan Buxton. I am the pastor of Allen Temple AME Church in the city of Atlanta, and we are in the Northwest Corridor. We're in the Northwest Corridor of Atlanta, and one of the things that we are seeing is that we have many indigenous low-income residents who are really being priced out of the area at this point. And it is, and so they're looking for housing that, of course, is safe, that is going to be healthy, that is near to all of the areas, that has a grocery store, that has a pharmacy, that is near quality schools. And so they're really looking for opportunities to make sure that they can remain in their community. And so that's part of what we're seeing.
So Reverend Buxton, staying with you for a second, how would this kind of faith-based housing initiative work?
Okay. Well, I think for us, and Josh is absolutely right. One thing that COVID showed us all is that the building is not necessarily the most important aspect, because we held church for almost a year and a half without even having a congregation go into a church, and so in the church building, there are many of us. Many churches who have parsonages, for example, as one spot, right? Our parsonages remain underutilized, and so one of the things that we did with our partnership with the Veterans Empowerment Organization is to rent out our parsonage rooms. It's a 5-bedroom house, right? I'm not living in it, and so what we did was to rent it out so that we would have the opportunity to house residents who need to have low income housing. And so we cut out a lot of the minutia to help to have them to move in. We also have undeveloped property that we have, and just, to be honest, a lot of churches are it's a big ship and it's slow to turn, to see that undeveloped property can be used for the edification of those in our community to help in that particular area.
This is a reminder to folks viewing the live stream at the moment, if you're watching Thursday afternoon with us, or Wednesday afternoon, with us, that you can leave questions in the comments. One of those questions, Leonard, the fact that there is a significant amount of vacant land in Atlanta, is this an unusual feature of a large metro city? Yes, Lynn Griffo asked this. Is that right?
Thank you for the question, Lynn. No, it's not. Like it's not haven't been heard of before. You have metropolitan cities very similar to Atlanta. We have the Charlotte, Seattle, find themselves with land, as Josh stated earlier, that publicly owned by the city or by the county or by churches. And that's where our mayor is starting to direct energy into those areas. As a community developer here, we've noticed developing over 21 years on the west side of Atlanta that one of the largest landowners are the churches. Not only are they largest landowners of where they sit, we have 160 some churches on the west side of Atlanta, but also that overage acreage that they have that Josh spoke about. And so us as a nonprofit community development corp, we have engaged those faith-based institutions, one, to inform them the importance of the land and how it could be used for higher use than just a parking lot or a cookout or just so on and so forth. So we've been able to come to them and inform them first, educate, partner, and share with them that we're not here to buy your land or take it from you. There are plenty complex ways to keep the church involved and in ownership of their land, and to develop the type of affordable, socially equitable housing that these legacy residents need, because the improvements are coming and we welcome the improvements. We just don't want the displacement that the market produces as the improvements come.
So Leonard, staying with you for a second, give me an example. What could be next to a church or on some of that land that kind of answers to some of the interests that members of that community on that church might have? As the Reverend just said, I want everything that anybody else has. I want access to good schools, and I want a pharmacy nearby, and I want a good grocery store. So what are the kinds of things, depending on obviously the size of land, that might work to keep that church still, as a center of community?
Yes. Prime example, a current project that we're working with a faith-based institution by the name of Simpson Street Church of Christ, built a new sanctuary some years back. Their old sanctuary collapsed in a storm, and they have this huge parking lot that's roughly a city block. We were able to talk with them and partner to now bring forward the Simpson, which is a new affordable housing development that's 139 units of affordable housing for families on this site. The church will maintain the ownership of the land. We will ground lease that land, and we will pay the church to develop this type of affordable housing on their land. This is a long-term 60-year partnership, but a good thing out of it, the church receives income that they could use for their sanctuary or other operation businesses. The community gets a new affordable housing development, but one of the good things about working with churches, their land is typically either very low cost or no cost, which allows us as developers to financially underwrite for a lower base population, which means the legacy residents that were in the community have a new place, decent and safe to stay as the improvements come. So that's just one example around churches leveraging their land, allowing the cost of the development to come down so you can do a deeper dive for those most vulnerable.
Josh, does this require any kind of rezoning? And also, the reason I kind of ask is that, I've had this conversation with developers and other leaders too, is that while we all have an interest in supporting affordable housing, those interests seem to change when that affordable housing gets closer to your own neighborhood. So how does the city walk that line, or how do you end up selling this as a public good and something that communities should invest in?
Sure. I think that in a lot of ways, traditional affordable housing, people think of, public housing project, 100% affordable, very low income housing, a tower next door to my house. That's 100% very low income. That's not the way that modern affordable housing is built. And we learned a lot from the mistakes, I think, of previous generations on how to address affordable housing. As we go about this work, one, I think, it's from neighborhood to neighborhood, it's going to look a little bit different. Every neighborhood has a different typology, a different level of density, and the city is growing right now very rapidly. And so some of that is morphing and changing, but I think it's important that we do that in intentional ways. Our vision for this work is that we create strong mixed income neighborhoods, to have the grocery stores and other key amenities that the Reverend was mentioning. We know it's important that we have a healthy mix of incomes within a given neighborhood to be able to pay for the different produce items or the coffee that you're going to buy at checkout, or the different things. That there needs to be a mixture in order to make it market viable from an economic development standpoint. And we also have found in a lot of the national and international research that mixed income communities create more economic mobility within a neighborhood. So if someone moves from one social class to the next, they're able to stay in their neighborhood, keep their community, and continue to thrive in a way that has a positive impact on those around them. And so as we work through this, our goal is that the housing projects that we build are integrated into the neighborhoods that we're working in and provide a mixture of housing units. So sometimes that's on a church side, maybe that's on a public land side, maybe that's a market rate project that happens across the street, but really thinking intentionally about how they all fit together so that we have very low income housing that we need to meet the needs of residents that are at that level, that we've got workforce housing so that the folks who are working in the job center in the urban core, as well as those that are working at the coffee shop or at the grocery store, can live in the neighborhood that they work in. And then having market rate housing is fundamental, right? We've got a city that's growing rapidly, that we've seen the fastest population growth in the last several generations over the last 10 years. And we need market rate housing in order to meet that demand, or it creates affordability issues all throughout the market. So we need a mixture of all of those things. And so zoning plays a role. Sure, you need to, a lot of old church sites are not zoned for the kind of multifamily density. So you have to go through a zoning process oftentimes on that. But I think for us, it really is thinking about the whole of a neighborhood and how do we get enough housing of different housing typologies in a neighborhood, so you don't have a neighborhood full of affordable housing or full of market rate housing that's completely unaffordable. We need a mixture of both, and the mayor's goal and the work we're doing is really neighborhood by neighborhood, trying to create a healthy housing ecosystem so that no matter your income, you could live in a given neighborhood if you want to.
Reverend, I've got a comment here, and it'll probably lead to a question to you. Lorianne Mills writes, we partner with our community faith leaders often, and it's an underutilized tool, such a great way to connect with people and collect more equitable data, get the questions they have, not just the answers we want. So my question to you is how have you been involved in any of the changes that are happening that will affect the people that come to that church or your church and the physical land around it?
Okay. Well, first, I partner with our community organizations. So I sit on the board of the Grove Park Foundation, and we are intricately involved in helping the Northwest Atlanta corridor to actualize what we're talking about, this space for brothers and sisters to be able to thrive. One of a huge market for us is to make sure that we're doing programming. We have a program called the Now program, where we specifically work with residents to help them to do what they need to do individually, because sometimes we need to have better training, education to be able to acquire better jobs or get better skills. We partner with the unions, like the Carpenters Union, to make sure that we are helping not just to help people with getting jobs, but also to be able to help where we can with the labor that's needed to deal with the rise of housing development in the particular area. And I also, as you can see, I work with the Oikos Institute. I am the Atlanta Ecosystem coordinator for the Oikos Institute. And our particular focus is working with BIPOC communities to make sure that they are harnessing as best they can the power of their assets. And we call that fishing differently. So the fish model simply says, what is about your faith capital, which is really based on finance at some point, right? Because where people's faith is, many pastors know if there's a faith issue, there's also a finance issue sometimes. So that's the F, the I, the intellectual capital, the S, the social capital, and then the H, the human capital. So how are we marketing all of those to build a better community? So those are particular ways that we're working within the community, and hopefully more faith-based leaders will get involved in those type of areas, so that they will be able to also hear the voice of the people in the community, as well as empower those voices.
Reverend, staying with you for a second, and this might not be an answer you have, but Lauren Riggs asked, does the Oikos Institute model echo what was done by the Nehemiah Coalition in the 80s, early 90s in Brooklyn, New York?
Well, now let me say, Hari, I actually I Googled that, right, to make sure, because I had not specifically heard of that. We have worked with people like in the Bronx, and we've done some training in that area. But I hope that my explanation, even of the Oikos Institute, does provide an answer for Sister Riggs. But we are definitely looking at how we can help build a coalition of faith-based leaders who understand that the church is really their community, and that if they're more involved in actualizing and helping to benefit the community, then the building and the land surrounding the building, the land on which the building sits, becomes a part of that puzzle to help people to grow better.
So, Leonard, I want to ask, I mean, what are the kinds of takeaways that people watching this stream should be thinking about? And we have about 10 minutes left, but between all three of you, I guess this is a question for all of you, but what are kind of the lessons learned? Josh hinted about kind of, even in thinking about what affordable housing is, what public housing is, trying to draft and design that differently. But given your kind of vantage point as as a developer, what are the things that, if you are trying to start something like this in a different city, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Thank you, Hari. Yes, we definitely have to reimagine, rethink, and rebuild. And to do that, the reimagining what affordable housing is, Joshua put it delicately around describing it. But one of the sticking points is, not only is it public housing or towers or multiple people or low income people, the stigma is that it's always poor Black people, Black and brown people. So I know this audience is mature enough to take that and understand that. So one, if we're going to rebuild American cities, we cannot have the same framework that put us in this position in the first place. So some of my takeaways would be, in these underserved, predominantly Black communities are where the opportunities are. Cities, states, philanthropists, corporations, and social impact has to be on the top of the list. If I had to do it all over, we would just talk and say we all benefit from these type of communities. Some take advantage of the communities, others benefit from them shopping at their new locations or their workforces. It's not a coincidence that low-income people commute into these higher income neighborhoods to work at these restaurants and these hotels and these malls, but they can't afford to live out there. That was by design. So if we're going to be the American cities rebuilt for 2022 and forward, we have to change those systems. And I think the faith-based institution is something that is over most communities and have been a staple in those communities, and really don't have to get the initial pushback as a developer may get trying to come in by themselves. Thank you.
Sure. Joshua?
Yeah. Well, first, I think Leonard's spot on some stuff he just said there. I think the basic question from a public policy standpoint is, what type of underutilized resource is available in your city, right? For Atlanta, it was our public land is where it started, and then expanded into our faith-owned land. We learned really quickly that, we're sitting on a gold mine. It's not well positioned. We've never thought about using it this way, but it could be a solution to a problem we never thought about, right? I mean, it was a problem we thought about, we never thought about using our land as that solution. So once we realized we had an underutilized resource that if we properly leverage, we could solve this massive public policy problem, or go a long way toward doing that, we've leaned all the way in on leveraging that. And we did the same thing working with the faith leaders of saying, hey, come along for this ride with us. You have an asset. It's an unlikely partnership. You have an asset that could actually help solve this core need that we have as a city. Work together with us. That's going to be different city by city. Some cities may have a very similar type of opportunity. Other cities aren't going to have that kind of land available. And you're going to have to look at different resources. But I would venture to guess that almost every U.S. city has some type of underutilized resource that could be an unlikely opportunity to leverage in order to address affordable housing needs or other kind of pressing public policy needs. I think we're fortunate that we've had such support around leveraging this particular resource in our underutilized land in order to address this problem.
Reverend, how about you?
Well, and thank you both for those. And I think one of those comments, because we have to really understand that many of the people who live in the areas that we're talking about, in these underrepresented areas, where churches are, many of the church members don't live in these areas. Mm. And so there's a great shift in understanding how to best bring in people who often don't see the same type of issues or have come out of those issues, I'll say, as it relates to socioeconomics. And so we can't let that go either, right? We have to realize that sometimes we have people who they worked hard to get this land. They don't want to do anything else with it. It's no different than some people, I've been in ministry a while, some people don't want the flowers to move from the same spot. Okay. So, using your land is completely different for people who you don't know. And people equate you being a member of the church with having access to the things of the church. Right. Mm. And so there's a great education for that. And I love that we're now having these conversations. Like Emory University now they've had it for a while. They have the dual degree in the MBA and the MDiv degree, so there's a conversation that needs to be had across the gamut of how we can work together in a different manner.
Reverend, staying with you for a second. I mean, it interests me that also after the real estate crash, perhaps through the pandemic as well, that people are recognizing the value of intergenerational wealth and how important ownership is versus just renting. And I wonder if that factors into the types of things that your parishioners tell you.
It absolutely does. And then to meet that need, one of the things that we're getting ready to have, here's a promo, on the second Saturday in December, we're actually holding a home buyer seminar, not just for just so people can figure out how to buy a house, but really, how do you get ready to purchase a house? Those are not conversations that have often happened in communities. And so we have to really be clear that we have to teach people the foundational skills so that they can be ready. I have a young lady, she said, I can afford $1,100 in rent. And I'm like, honey, you need to be buying a house. Right? Like, why are you, you're paying somebody else's rent. So, yeah. She's one of the people that we are absolutely tagging, and you are intentional of designing opportunities for people who are in in those situations, right? Because they don't, if you don't know, you don't know. But it's we who know, we have a responsibility of sharing and helping other people to grow.
All right, Leonard, that last idea to you as well, just as we close here. About ownership.
Even though I play in the rental space as a developer of affordable housing, ownership is a way. I will say that the old standard way of owning for 30 years and building wealth, my own opinion, I am not a fan or a champion for the timeline that it take us today in 2022 than it did our parents and our grandparents. I think the model needs to shift on home ownership to build wealth faster versus when it's time for you to die.
All right. On that note, I think we'll close out this portion of our conversation tonight. I want to say thanks to Joshua Humphreys, the director of the Office of Housing and Community Development, Leonard Cohen, the CEO of Quest Communities and an entrepreneur, and also Reverend Dr. Susan Hillary Buxton, senior pastor of Allen Temple AME Church in Atlanta. All of you, thank you so much for this conversation. I also want to remind our audience that this is our last segment for today. Tomorrow, you can also tune in at noon again, and you can see more of these conversations of American cities we're building. My name is Hari Srinivasan. Thanks so much for joining us.